Thank you very much. We have resolved all technical difficulty. Since it's now the right time, I want to welcome all of you to our special guest speaker today, Jayne Holland, who is the Chief Privacy Officer for Tyler Technologies. Tyler Technologies is a S&P 500 component company, is a major company that works primarily in the public sector, meaning with government organizations across the United States, especially state and local governments. They also work with the feds. I am honored to be able to introduce a distinguished speaker, a C-level person from such a major company to our audience today. We expect to hear from her aspects of software quality from the perspective of a C-level person. With that said, Jayne was also Chief Security Officer for NIC USA. This company is a major contractor for state government across the US. Roughly half the states in the US use NIC USA, which is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Tyler Technologies for their e-government related services. In the state of Oregon, as well as these other states, all of you that live in the United States have a high probability of, through your day-to-day life throughout the year, by interacting with organizations such as Department of Motor Vehicle, paying taxes, paying fines, you would have interacted knowingly or not knowingly with the services of NIC USA and now Tyler Technologies. Without further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to Jayne and for her to tell us about the importance of quality from the perspective of a C-level person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ying. It was 2005. That was 17 years ago. It's amazing. It feels like yesterday. And I was returning to work after a 2-year hiatus from a corporate job with a healthcare services company out of Dallas, where I was general counsel. I had spent 2 years at home with 2 small children following a move to Kansas City, which is where I am now, from New Orleans. I was really excited about getting back into the swing of things. But when I was interviewing with my current employer, I was upfront that with 2 small children at home under the age of 3, I really wanted a 9-to-5 job as opposed to what I'd had in the past. And they were fine with that arrangement and kind of off we went. Little did I know, having a 9-to-5 job was just not in the cards. And apparently I just didn't know yet that I really didn't want a 9-to-5 job. 2 things happened fairly quickly after starting my new job that kind of changed the trajectory of my career in a way that I could never have imagined. The first came, believe it or not, 10 days on the job when I was trying to figure out who was who and what was what, like finding pertinent contract documents. I was called into the general counsel's office and he asked me if I knew anything about the payment card industry's data security standards, which we refer to as the PCI DSS. And I didn't. I had no idea what it was. I'd never even heard of it. I was quickly informed that the company had to demonstrate compliance with the PCI DSS within 30 days. And the person in charge of managing the project had abruptly left the company with medical reasons and could not be contacted. And I was charged with figuring out where we were and what had to be done to meet the compliance deadline. As many of you may know, the PCI DSS is an industry standard, not law, and it's a set of requirements intended to ensure that all companies that process, store, or transmit cardholder data maintain a secure environment. And because the company processed payments on behalf of our government partners, compliance was necessary. I threw myself into the standard. I talked with everybody I could about the status of our compliance efforts. And I got a small team together between the products and the IT teams to get the work done. Fortunately for me, we and the company, we were more than halfway through when I got involved and we successfully met the deadline. But the goal we set in 2005 was to meet and exceed the PCI DSS, and we have done just that. This kind of started my cultivation of a subject matter expertise in this area, and I became a PCI internal security assessor, which means that I can perform and support payment audits of our payment processing environment to make sure that we're properly securing the billions of payments we process through our payment engine. This PCI experience is important because of the second thing that happened. The second thing happened 6 months after I was on the job, and inconveniently on Christmas Eve. I was informed that we had our first data security breach. The security breach was discovered by a third party who found information on a Russian hacker's website, including information, credit card information, along with names. And the credit card information had been decrypted by the hackers and posted on this website. Things started to move very, very quickly. And our CEO and general counsel were on the front lines, and they asked me to help figure out what happened and what we were required to do next. If you've ever been involved in a security breach investigation, you know that it can be all-encompassing, and it was. Because payment card data was involved, obviously the PCI DSS was in scope, which meant that we had to hire a forensic company that was certified by the PCI Security Standards Council. And at the time, there were only 4 companies that were certified to perform this type of forensic investigation. So we picked the one that had a national reputation. Most of the other ones we weren't even familiar with. And of course, now I think there are hundreds that have been qualified over time. There were daily meetings with our state partner. And at the very beginning, it was on every hour, the top of every hour. There were third-party audits. There were countless reports to the card brands. There were media inquiries, breach notification letters, call center engagements, call center scripts, credit monitoring programs to navigate, press releases, meetings with the FBI, and a legislative hearing. This was our first experience, and I can assure you it was very unpleasant. While there were very tense moments, as you can imagine, fortunately, our state partner was very understanding and appreciative of our efforts. And when the contract was rebid a year later, we were chosen over other vendors to continue building customized solutions and services for the state. And I firmly believe it is because we took accountability, we apologized for the mistake, and we vowed to do better, and we did. The incident was a call to action, and our entire security program and our payment processing methodology and process began a maturity process that was very calculated, no small feat, and it continues today. I am an optimist, and in this case, like most others, I believe that good things result from bad experience, and you have to be open to embracing the lesson and the opportunity. In this case, I quickly learned, and it didn't take long, that secure quality code is really essential to withstanding or mitigating cyber attacks that cause a data breach. And for me, the incident was really a pivotal moment in my career. It was the realization that I had a really strong interest in evaluating our processes and improving how we were securing our services and systems to make them more resilient. Good afternoon. I am Jayne Friedland Holland. And as Ying said, I am Chief Privacy Officer and Deputy Chief Legal Officer for Tyler Technologies. I wanted to find solutions that would promote the efficiency and security of our services. I knew that if possible, I wanted to prevent or reduce the possibility of another issue like this one. And I did not want us to be in reactive mode. I wanted to be proactive and really, at the end of the day, be an industry leader. That desire to champion the security program at NIC led to my role as NIC's Chief Security Officer, the first female member of NIC's executive team, and as I said, the current CPO and Deputy Chief Legal Officer for Tyler. As I mentioned, I learned through this incident that developing secure quality code is essential, and it's not a nice to have if you want to mitigate cyber attacks. Bad code will lead to many undesirable issues and results from a number of things, including there is a big challenge and difficulty in finding and retaining developers. There is a lack of motivation amongst developers to try and take on any more. Developers are burned out and overwhelmed dealing with tight deadlines. Writing secure code is not yet a priority. Functionality has routinely been the priority. There appears to be a disconnect between what developers think is secure quality code and what it actually means or involves. There may be no written SDLC process that incorporates security throughout the life cycle. And if one exists, there has likely been no training on the process. There is no training on secure code development or how to properly maintain code already in production. And there are few written processes to support the development of secure quality code. A poll conducted by Stripe found that the worldwide cost of dealing with bad code to be as high as $85 billion per year. Since the effects of bad code persist until it's removed, for me, the only sensible approach is to figure out how to improve the situation early on by combining two key pieces: people and processes. These are the two key elements that must work together to make quality code a reality. You hear about it in the news, and it's almost daily. Every day there is a news story about another data breach. Here is some unsettling information about recent notable settlements, fines, and costs associated with highly reported data breaches. We will start with the smallest fine. Pearson was hit with a class action lawsuit over a data breach, and they were fined $1 million by the SEC for misleading statements and omissions. SolarWinds, which most of you have heard about, I'm sure, had a major third-party vendor supply chain breach that had a global impact, and it cost SolarWinds $40 million in the first quarter of 2021. Capital One, due to their data breach, they were fined $80 million by a bank regulator, and that's just the regulatory fine. Yahoo paid $85 million to settle a class action lawsuit, and that doesn't obviously include their reduced enterprise value. Zoom, another one we all know all too well, paid $85 million to settle 14 class action lawsuits over security flaws in their software. And Zoom really experienced how a lack of attention to application security affects your reputation and leads to lost business, even in an environment ripe for its product. Home Depot paid approximately $200 million to settle class action lawsuits, and they're still paying years after the breach. Facebook paid $650 million to settle a class action privacy lawsuits. It's the largest settlement under Illinois' Biometric Information Privacy Act. And finally, Equifax. They agreed to pay at least $700 million to settle lawsuits from its massive 2017 data breach. And that penalty is on top of the $1.4 billion that the company had already spent on post-breach activities and legal fees. This chart simply demonstrates that with data breaches, penalties, fines, and settlements have ranged from $1 million to $700 million. And unfortunately, it seems to be trending upwards. In the past month, we've learned about security breaches at the IRS, which was due to a software vulnerability, Hotel Intercontinental, Uber, and U-Haul. Financially motivated criminals and nation-state actors have come out swinging over the past 12 months. Daily, there are claims of social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license numbers, and more personal information exposed and for sale on the dark web. It never ends, and we seem to be caught in this vicious cycle of changing passwords, having credit cards reissued, enrolling in another credit monitoring program, enabling a security freeze on credit reports, and watching bank accounts and other related financial accounts with careful scrutiny for fraud. And naturally, complacency can set in, or a sort of desensitization to the issue, because we hear about it daily. As a company leader, what has kept me up at night is the threat of a significant cyber attack. And I have repeatedly asked myself, are we doing enough? Will it be enough? What more can we do? Amongst many other things, we remain constantly vigilant, and even more so on holidays and over weekends, especially Friday afternoons, when apparently attackers often strike and think we're not paying attention. Little do they know, we are always monitoring for malicious or unusual activity. And in my role, there is absolutely no room for complacency. A legal responsibility exists to customers, partners, and their users, and oftentimes a board of directors and shareholders, to take the right steps to mitigate harm to our customers and their customers, prevent negative impact of our brand, avoid financial penalties, and potential lawsuits resulting from bad code that causes security issues. There are many reasons why quality code is important, such as the impact it will have on people who use it, like saving time and effort. But from where I sit, building solutions that are secure and not susceptible to cyber attacks is a top priority. You'll hear my perspective today based on my experience and priority to protect the company from this type of risk. Insecure code also costs thousands of hours per year in lost productivity as applications and programs are reworked to fix problems or to add security. This also keeps development teams from operating at peak efficiency, slowing production at a time when demand is surging. As I said, there are many reasons why quality code is important. The Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report is helpful in illustrating why quality code is important and why security must be a priority. For the past 15 years, Verizon has been putting out this report. And if you've never read it, it's a really interesting read. I know I'm a little bit of a security and privacy geek, so I find it particularly interesting. But this particular year, it's based on their analysis of approximately 24,000 incidents, 5,000 of which include confirmed breaches. And the data represents worldwide breaches and incidents investigated by Verizon's Threat Research Center, or provided to Verizon by hundreds of global contributors. Based on the existing threat landscape, there is some information in the report that should get your attention. The report makes it clear that threats against businesses and organizations are more dangerous and expensive today than at any other point in history. This is supported by the recent Cost of a Data Breach report from IBM and the Ponemon Institute that found that the price organizations pay to clean up after a cyber breach now tops $3.8 million per incident. And this is just the monetary costs. The Verizon report also concluded that web applications were far and away the top cyber attack vector, and that software supply chain needs greater security controls, and ransomware is a top priority threat. Roughly 70% of incidents were due to compromising a web application. This underscores the importance of avoiding low-quality development practices and adopting secure coding practices, including testing software throughout the software development lifecycle. No one is immune from this attack vector. Organizations have to understand the very real threat to their software and related systems. To me, one clear priority emerges from this data. Understand your organization's software development processes and promote secure code development to mitigate attacks that may result in a security breach. Understand that insecure code introduces vulnerabilities in a system or exploits tools or libraries that are out of date or that have known problems. Everyone has seen bad code and they complain about it, but what is done to fix the underlying problems is part of the key to avoiding the bugs, the security vulnerabilities, and more. This is critical to what most organizations or many organizations do, and yet there are many sizable challenges. Building an effective security program that promotes secure code doesn't happen overnight. In my experience, it takes a lot of time and lots of patience. From where I sit, when we talk about key elements that influence code quality, there are two things that come to mind and cannot be overlooked. It is people and processes, which are the key elements and the focus of my presentation today. Like I said, there are various challenges when it comes to secure quality code development. I'm going to walk through some of the most significant challenges I believe impact secure quality code and share recommendations or solutions for addressing them. I can assure you that this will not be a technical security discussion, and I promise to avoid all security-related acronyms, but I will tell you right now, I will refer to the PCI DSS as I have, and the software development cycle as SDLC. What I share with you today is based on my experience. It's based on what I have seen and know has worked for us. You may think differently about this topic and might execute things in other ways, and that's okay. Each and every organization is different. However, I hope that we share the same focus, which is that security has to be top of mind when we talk about quality code. People are a very important factor when it comes to quality code. However, there are some challenges we face when it comes to people, and I'm going to talk specifically about our development resources. Like most of the job market today, the demand for software developer exceeds the supply, and developers are overworked and burned out. In addition, organizations are facing challenges like finding and retaining developers. We're feeling the effects of the Great Resignation, or it's also referred to as the Big Quit or the Great Reshuffle, that started in 2021 and it continues today. Record numbers of people have left their jobs since the beginning of the pandemic. The most cited reasons include wage stagnation amid a rising cost of living, limited opportunities for career advancement, hostile work environment, lack of benefits, inflexible remote work, policies, and just long-lasting job dissatisfaction. And a new challenge has emerged for organizations and is being referred to as quiet quitting. It refers to people who are still performing their job duties, and while they're not quitting their job, they're unwilling to go above and beyond. They no longer subscribe to the hustle culture that work has to be your life. For some, it means mentally checking out from work, and for others, it's about not accepting additional work without additional play. Play a little video that hopefully will clearly demonstrate what we're talking about.
Hey, Bob, for the next month or two, I'm going to need you to come in an hour or two early and stay a couple hours behind. A little short-staffed and all hands on deck. Oh, sure thing. Are you going to double my pay for the extra hours I'm working? Bob, we pay you a $40,000 a year salary. Of course, we're not going to give you overtime. Think of it as a learning experience and giving the company an extra helping hand. Okay. Does this learning experience pay my bills? Or better yet, does it pick up my kids from daycare? No, but there is a performance review next month. What? So that I can get a 5% pay bump versus 3%? Yeah, I'm all set. I'm going to quiet quit. Going to quiet what? Quiet quitting. I'm going to come in during my normal working hours next week and do my job. If you need me to do more, you can pay me more. Otherwise, I'm all set. Thanks.
So as you can see, there are some real challenges here, and we're all feeling the effects. These circumstances can and inevitably will impact our development resources and the ability to deliver secure quality code. And the challenges continue. Developers are increasingly dealing with many pressures, which are simply not beneficial to creating an environment where quality code can be developed. A year-long study by a reveal of approximately 2,000 software developers and IT professionals between 2021 and 2022 highlighted the biggest challenges facing developers in 2022. The study concluded that the three biggest challenges facing software developers in 2022 include 41% said high client expectations, 40% said increased customer demands, and 36% said issues with project management within the digital workplace. Other key challenges identified include the following: maintaining current talent, keeping employees engaged, limited resources, not enough time to complete work, and inability to keep pace with tools. I believe it's fairly obvious when you look at this that these are fairly significant issues, and the percentages are pretty significant. There are even more revealing studies about the development work environment that support the findings of these studies. For example, in a study on the state of code review, it concluded that the primary reason a developer ignores quality code is due to workload. In this study, more than 40% of developers indicated that workload and deadlines to complete a project forces them to ignore basic quality standards while developing software. This is a recipe for disaster. And what results is bad or insecure code. According to Isaac Lyman's article on code quality, he concludes that code quality is a factor in job satisfaction among programmers, and companies that want to attract world-class talent, increase employee engagement, and limit turnover can't afford to ignore the relationship. If you want to turn the tide, we need to consider a more reasonable and workable approach for our software development resources. Lyman also concluded, quote, anything that affects the mental state of a programmer is likely to be reflected in their code. Promoting, quote, quality code then is partially a matter of improving organizational health and competence as a whole. All of the studies referenced have clearly and consistently found that software developers are under a lot of pressure, which is impacting quality code. It seems undeniable that a programmer's ability to code is often dependent on their state of mind. Organizations have to find ways, creative ways, to attract and retain talent and to prevent burnout over the long haul. We seriously cannot expect unhappy and overworked developers to produce secure quality code under these circumstances. Let's talk about ways that we can enhance productivity and better influence code quality. I believe the following recommendations or solutions will not only enhance productivity and code quality, but they'll also improve overall organizational health and competence. You really must prioritize taking care of your development resources. And again, I would say this is true in the general sense for any and all personnel. And we start off with really minimizing or don't allow overtime. Consistently working overtime results in burnout, and minimizing OT overtime will really help keep the burnout factor in check. Pace development teams with short, flexible workdays. Be flexible. We've all learned a lot about flexibility during the pandemic. We now know that people can successfully work remotely. Be flexible with developers. A hybrid approach for developers has been a great alternative, especially when combined with the use of digital platforms for collaboration. Don't deny, but encourage PTO to allow developers to recharge. Everyone needs to recharge their batteries. And in the fast-paced environment in which developers work, they need a pause button to regroup and recharge their batteries. Encourage them to use their PTO to take care of themselves. Promote an environment of mutual respect and healthy relationships where honesty and integrity drive interactions with each other. This one I really like because it has a great track record of success. Empower and encourage your employees to be heard. For example, give them multiple communication channels and platforms to communicate with other team members and other resources throughout the enterprise. Give them opportunities to work collaboratively, encourage them to participate in meetings and voice their concerns, and make sure you address any concerns that they voice. People who feel like they have been heard are more likely to be committed to their employer, thereby improving retention rates. Promote ownership and responsibility. As a leader, some of the ways that you can do this is by exhibiting ownership and responsibility yourself, delegating authority, not just the work, encouraging your development resources to solve their own problems, and provide ongoing opportunities for learning and development. Cultivate an individual or a team's potential and create a culture of positivity. You can do this by making sure that your resources feel valued. Maintain clear expectations and set goals. Again, encourage collaboration and teamwork, and welcome individuals from different backgrounds and celebrate their differences. Be an example and show gratitude. Model what you want to see in your resources. Thank people for their work and accomplishments. It helps them see their worth as a colleague and as a human being. Take the blame where appropriate, share the praise, and make communication a priority. Another recommendation is to provide clarity about your organization. Make sure that developers understand what is expected of them. What is their role and place in the organization? How their role helps the organization successfully meet its mission. And what is expected in order to achieve that mission? Define success. When leaders provide this type of organizational clarity, team members tend to be secure in their roles and their place on the team. You can also tackle some of the notable challenges with development resources by promoting better project management to avoid unreasonable expectations and missed deadlines. Unclear or confusing requirements can cause vague specifications, which can impede the developer's work and degrade code quality. Prioritize deliverables and related deadlines with a skilled and experienced manager. Recognizing the inherent difficulties of developing software, introduce tools that make it easier for developers to do their job and promote collaboration and security throughout the development lifecycle. In addition, think about promoting technical leadership by providing access to the right resources and provide training. I cannot emphasize this enough. I'm sure you couldn't tell. Don't assume a programmer has the requisite knowledge to produce secure quality code. They don't. Learning what secure quality code means and how to develop it is something that requires training. Provide solid, secure code development training and retraining. Training is not a nice to have, it's a necessity, and in some cases, it's a requirement. Earlier, I talked about the PCI DSS, and under version 4.0, software developers are required to receive appropriate training at least once every 12 months, and it's recommended that such training include the following: development languages in use, secure software design, secure coding techniques, use of techniques and methods for finding vulnerabilities in code, processes to prevent reintroducing vulnerabilities in code, processes on how to automate security testing tools for detecting vulnerabilities in software. When we started our formal secure development training many, many moons ago, we brought in kind of development gurus to teach our developers about code quality and secure code development. We have since evolved from that to an internal incremental training program, which has different levels of complexity, but everyone starts off at the same point. And each year we require our developers to do the tiered training, and each year we update it. Our training becomes more advanced as you move from level to level, and you can't move to the next level until you've completed the one before it. So this is, again, just the way we have done it. You have to make sure that you're training people in the security aspects of the language, framework, and libraries they're using to build secure quality software. We have found that practical training using real incidents and issues to be particularly impactful, which includes vulnerability examples, and also use of gaming techniques where coders compete with others to demonstrate their coding practices can also be a very impactful training method. In addition, as industry accepted secure coding practices change, organizational coding practices and developer training must be updated to address the new threats. This training will help developers become familiar with the different types of vulnerabilities and potential attacks, and use of measures to avoid the potential attack vectors when developing code. Without security-aware developers, organizations will discover that the same vulnerabilities are introduced over and over again, which is counterproductive to developing secure quality code. In sum, if we know how developers feel may impact code quality, then we have to take the steps like the ones we just reviewed to help alleviate their overworked and burned out state. Taking care of our developers has to be a priority. Taking care of them, keeping them happy, and providing appropriate support will have a huge upside. Higher satisfaction leads to higher engagement and retention rates, which is a benefit considering that demand currently exceeds supply for developers. Happy and well-trained coders promotes better, more secure code. Processes are another key element influencing secure quality code. And as we know, based on reports like the one from Verizon, web applications are and continue to be primary targets for attackers. Poorly coded applications provide an easy path to gain access to sensitive data and to systems. Weaknesses and vulnerabilities in application security flaws has been among the top causes of external breaches for years. A development process must exist that embeds security at the very beginning of the design process and not added on at the end of the development stage. When this is in place, we often refer to it in the security world as having a robust SDLC. The goal of having this process in place is to promote the writing of secure code, free from vulnerabilities or potential exploits from the start. Building solutions that are susceptible to cyber attacks, again, will inevitably damage the organization's brand and impact the business pipeline. In a published study conducted in 2022 by IDG, which is a provider of advisory services for the IT markets, and Wabi, a company that helps organizations make security a part of their software development lifecycle, found that companies utilizing continuous security throughout their SDLC have decreased vulnerabilities in their code by 50%. The study focused on the integration of development and security as well as continuous security. Participants included IT and security leaders and software application development directors and managers across many industries and many company sizes. And they concluded that the importance of security integration within the software development lifecycle is clear. 98% of respondents place high importance on integrating security throughout the development lifecycle. And yet only 15% report that security is always integrated from the beginning of the development lifecycle. The study also revealed that respondents understand that lack of security integration is about more than just a risk of a data breach. The lack of security integration within the SDLC resulted in project delays, and these percentages are by the largest to the smallest, resulted in project delays, financial loss, compromised reputation, reallocation to fix issues, inability to meet compliance requirements, security breaches, and legal or regulatory fines. Finally, the study revealed that the benefits of integrating security go beyond security breaches, as 70% of respondents cite increased productivity as the top benefit of security integration, with cost savings and security breaches tied for second, each cited by 67% of the respondents. When we talk about a robust software development lifecycle, we are talking about a documented process that incorporates security from the beginning of the lifecycle until the end. This is not a nice to have. It's a necessity if you want secure quality code. Surprisingly, I have talked with leaders and have found that not all organizations have a documented SDLC. And if they do, it is unlikely to incorporate security, sometimes at all, but from beginning to end. In other cases, organizations may have a documented SDLC, but it hasn't been reviewed or updated in years, and no one even knows if it's being followed. Be aware that the most significant audits that you may endure require evidence of a documented SDLC. And as we often say in the legal and auditing business, if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. It is clear to me that developers who cannot rely on written processes do not have the necessary tools and cannot be expected to understand the breadth and scope of developing secure quality code. I mentioned this earlier, but again, once you have the documented SDLC, you have to make the investment to appropriately educate or train your developers. Training developers is an essential piece of the process and minimizes risk to the organization. The bottom line is this: informed developers tend to produce quality code. There are many process considerations I can talk about, like static code analysis, application and vulnerability scans, and penetration tests, which to me are a given. Those are all essential. They're not recommended, they're required. But I'm going to highlight those that I believe are also impactful on code quality. We acknowledge that the software development process is complex with many elements, and that developers must be provided with the necessary documentation that explains the SDLC process. The earlier, the better, such as during the onboarding process, as an example. Don't miss the opportunity to start off strong and empower your developers with knowledge. There are a lot of resources out there. We certainly leaned on these, and they're really great as a guide to best practices. Consider leveraging some of these existing secure software lifecycle management methodologies and frameworks for building your SDLC, including NIST, who in February issued guidance on developing secure software and evaluating secure practices. You've got ISO, you've got OpenSAM, SafeCode, the CIS top 20 critical cybersecurity controls. And as I mentioned earlier, there's also the PCI DSS, which provides some direction on secure code development. In addition to the documented SDLC, developing checklists to support the process is also very helpful. And the checklists will really serve as a guide and help ensure that nothing has been missed throughout the SDLC. Checklists tend to be more helpful when they're broken down into digestible pieces, and it makes it easier so it's more understandable and has a better chance of being followed. In effect, what you're saying with the checklist is the code cannot be moved to the next process without completing all of the required checks. And I would highly recommend that you audit this process to validate that it's being followed, whether you do that internally or you do it with a third party. As we often say, trust, but verify. Another consideration for key processes includes having project documentation, because this can impact code quality if it doesn't exist. This is especially important with the significant turnover that we're all experiencing. The documented SDLC process combined with the project documentation will make it much easier for new development resources to understand the code and for any new programmer to pick up where another one has left off. I also want to highlight the code review process. Code review is, as I'm sure most of you in the room and on the phone know, is a software QA process whereby the software source code is analyzed manually by a team or by using automated code review tools. Like QA testing, which is a necessary process to improve the performance of software, code reviews are just as important and considered an industry best practice. The cost source code reviews guarantee a higher quality code base. They should be part of the SDLC process. Code reviews are tremendously beneficial in impacting code quality, and they may include adopting security tools to identify and address flaws early and as often in the software development lifecycle. Some tools actually help developers teach them about errors in their code. The one that comes to mind right off the bat is static code analysis tools, which are tremendously helpful in teaching coders about issues with their code and how to fix them going forward. Again, this really supports the ability to make corrections early on and learn from those results to improve code quality prior to release. It has the added benefit of helping create an environment of learning. Peer code review is a type of code review process that has proven to pay off and should be a process consideration. As you probably know, this is where developers perform a review of other developers' work. And again, it's a beneficial process that has been proven to influence quality code. A survey by Microsoft found that developers consider code quality improvement, bug detection, and knowledge transfer to be the main benefit to code reviews. The OWASP Code Review Guide notes that having a formal review process and review of checklists has been found to improve code quality. And let's not forget about maintaining existing code. Code reviews are also an essential process for maintaining existing code. Part of the software lifecycle should always include ongoing reviews of existing code. I don't know how many times I've said that. This should occur when changes are made to code or as part of an annual code review process. You can't simply develop code, release it into production, and never look at it again. Keeping software up to date is an important aspect of good cyber risk hygiene. This becomes even more important as the threat landscape changes. Hackers perpetually scan the internet looking for vulnerable code, and when found, they exploit it. A best practice is to build and perform ongoing code assessments to ensure code is not susceptible to current threats. Anything that may impact the security and quality of code should be reviewed. These processes, all significant factors in impacting secure code quality, can be further supported when developers and security resources work collaboratively. I realize I may be a little biased here, but I think it's fair to say that a security team can be a tremendous resource to assist in promoting the secure coding process. And therefore, it's important that they work collaboratively with developers. One way that organizations have done this is through a security champions program. It can really help serve to bridge the gap between the development teams and the security teams with the inevitable benefit of impacting secure code quality. A security champion is routinely or typically a member of the development team. They're also an extension of the security team, and they tend to be seen by the security team as the go-to person when we're working on application security issues. They can translate security in a way the developers can understand. Security folks have a tendency to use their technical security terms in a way they think everyone should understand, and that is not the case, and that can be a problem. So good security people know how to talk in a way that everyone can understand, and that's really what the security champion is doing in this case. They work closely with both teams to make the magic happen, and they help close the gap between security and development teams because in a sense, they play for both teams. They're like a member of both teams. They're trained to understand basic application security issues and solutions to remediate coding issues. Because they're proactively working with the development team to make sure that no part of the security assessment and testing process is missed, it prevents the surprise factor of additional security requirements later in the development stage. And again, because the security champion is proactive and they understand the process and they're working with the security team to review the results of the various assessments, it helps identify issues and decision-making early on in the process. It is much easier to shift earlier in the process if necessary versus at the end. And this is certainly a much more efficient way to do things. In sum, to me, it's a combination of two key factors that influence secure quality code: people and processes. While many challenges exist, as we discussed today, there are many proactive things that organizations can do to help promote secure quality code. And then there is the legal foundation that we cannot ignore. Being the attorney that I am, I could not help wrapping up today's presentation without mentioning some legal considerations for you. These are really driving a lot of the requirements and standardization of best practices. And I love this stuff because this is the world that I live in, and I felt like I should share some of these things with you. I think that you'll find some of these things may be directly or indirectly related to quality code, and some may or may not be applicable to you based on your industry and your customer base, but they are worth noting, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm really hopeful that you will walk away with some nugget of information that you didn't know about until today's presentation. You should know that failure to follow industry best practices or use commercially reasonable security standards in building software to keep services and systems secure may result in contractual liability, litigation, scrutiny by customers, users, and regulators, impact your brand, and cause reputational damage. If you do business in California, you should be aware that under California's privacy laws, it requires all businesses to take reasonable precautions to protect consumers' personal information from a security breach. The law authorizes what it calls a private right of action, which is basically the right of California residents to file a lawsuit against a business if a failure to implement reasonable security safeguards caused a data breach. And California residents can seek monetary damages and other forms of relief without even having to show actual harm. You should know that if your software causes a data breach, resulting in the unauthorized disclosure of personal information, you may have a responsibility to provide notification to impacted individuals based on a state's data breach notification laws. Failure to do so will result in monetary fines as defined by the applicable state statute, and may also entail bad press and reputational damage. There seems to be a theme. There could also be scrutiny from legislative bodies and regulatory agencies like the SEC and the FTC, and be aware that the payment card brands have their own set of breach notification and incident response requirements, and failure to comply with those could result in very hefty fines. If you are doing business with the federal government, you should know about President Biden's executive order to improve the nation's cybersecurity, which applies to the software supply chain. The stated purpose of the executive order is to improve the security of software by establishing baseline security standards for development of software sold to the government, including requiring developers to maintain greater visibility into their software and making security data publicly available. I'm still not really sure what that means. It's going to be interesting to see how that rolls out. I'm going back, sorry. And also to create a program with an Energy Star-like label, so the government and the public can determine whether software was developed securely. While this executive order applies to federal executive agencies and federal contractors, you should be aware that the private sector is likely to see a focus on software supply chain security and transparency through labeling on software and IoT devices. Software and IoT device companies should expect new security requirements and assessment standards that address secure code development. You should also know that following the executive order, in mid-September, the Office of Management and Budget, which I'll refer to as OMB, issued new guidelines that require all federal agencies to buy and use software that complies with development and security processes approved by the federal government. The OMB director said in a memo, quote, "Federal agencies must only use software provided by software producers who can attest to complying with the government-specified secure software development processes as described in the NIST guidance." NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and as I mentioned earlier, in February, they laid out principles for secure software development that companies can use to assess whether various components that go into assembling complex software are safe and free of bugs and backdoors that could allow hackers to penetrate systems. Under the OMB guidelines, officials that are overseeing technology purchases at federal agencies must obtain a self-attestation from software vendors that they have followed the security steps mandated or developed by NIST. And within 90 days, all federal agencies must prepare an inventory of their software, and within 6 months, agencies must ask vendors to attest that their software was developed using those secure processes. Chris DeRusha, the federal CIO, stated, quote, "Not too long ago, the only real criteria for the quality of a piece of software was whether it worked as advertised. With the cyber threats facing federal agencies, our technology must be developed in a way that makes it resilient and secure. This is not theoretical. Foreign governments and criminal syndicates are regularly seeking ways to compromise our digital infrastructure," close quote. And finally, you should know that if you're not following industry best practices for software development and more generally security best practices, many insurers are refusing to provide cyber insurance coverage. As you may have heard, the cyber insurance market is volatile and ever-changing. Insurance companies are setting very stringent requirements to obtain cyber insurance coverage, and the application process now includes questions about compliance with very specific best practices, and you must accurately represent what you do or risk denial of coverage or rescission of the policy. Insurers will check your history and record of attacks and outages to determine if they will insure you. And if you have a track record of attacks, outages, security breaches, or lack of cohesive processes and essential processes, it will jeopardize your ability to obtain cyber insurance coverage. This is yet another reason why you must have the right software development processes in place to develop quality code, along with other key security best practices across the enterprise. The two key elements that I focused on today that influence secure quality code will certainly better position you to be prepared for these various legal challenges and requirements to the extent that they apply to you. So based on the consequences that may result from a data breach for failure to have reasonable security measures in place, along with emerging requirements for developing secure quality software and the progressive requirements for cyber insurance, you must have the right people to do the job. Happy, appreciated, and well-trained developers, those who have been taught how to develop secure code, who can work collaboratively with security resources to build best practices for secure quality code. Take your software development processes very seriously and have a documented, robust SDLC in place that incorporates security throughout the life cycle, which includes but is not limited to some of the processes we talked about today.
Jayne, I apologize. Our allocated time is coming to a close, and
okay.
If I can ask you to quickly wrap up, I appreciate it.
Okay, will do. When I started my job in 2005, we were building a maturity process that continues today. The security of our services and products have always been a number one priority. And what has resulted is a company with a very strong security culture, which is critical. Everybody has a part to play to make it work. We know we're not perfect, and there will always be issues, but each year we commit to doing things to be even more resilient and more secure. Remember what I said. It is all about a maturity process that evolves over time. You start from where you are right now and strive to do more each and every year to mature your processes. We must continuously assess the weak links so we can shore up the holes and promote quality code. You cannot keep your head in the sand, and you don't want to be an easy target. It is no longer reasonable to push security down the priority list. Do the right things to minimize the risk of something going wrong. Quality code is a complex process. Admittedly, there is much more to the equation than secure quality code to ward off bad actors. Organizations must be aware of the latest threats and diversify protections and security visibility wherever it can. Ongoing training of employees to spot, identify social engineering tactics, and frequent password updates also make a significant difference. If you don't remember anything about what I said today, I hope you walk away remembering the two key elements I believe influence code quality. It's people and processes. Also remember to take into consideration the legal foundation, which is clearly a force at play here. It all appears to be moving in one inevitable direction, and that is requiring implementation of best practices and reasonable security, or suffer the consequences. I enjoyed speaking with you today. Thank you for inviting me to be your keynote speaker, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.